we start with Professor Alina Bargaoanu. She will have a presentation on global narratives, local adaptations, the case of pandemic conspiracy narratives crossing the public spaces in Central and Eastern Europe. Professor Alina Bargaoanu is a Romanian communication scholar with a very strong interest in digital transformation, strategic transformation, and fighting disinformation. She works at National University of Political Studies and Public Administration in Bucharest, and she is a member of the advisory board of the European Digital Media Observatory, as well as European Center of Excellence and Countering Hybrid Threats in Helsinki. She was a visiting scholar at Harvard University and served as a member of high-level expert group on fake news and online disinformation at the European Commission. Professor Alina Bargaoanu, please take the floor. Can you please do your mic on so that we can hear your voice?
Yes, sure.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, first of all, for giving me the honor to be in such a high-profile position during your conference. Thank you very much, dear Malgorzata. Before going as such into my speech, first of all, let me express my awe. I mean, God, didn't I miss those buildings? I mean, it is incredible. I'm in a very emotional state and I almost forgot what I had to tell you after seeing that movie. The second thing, the introductory remarks and also the movie provided the best background for my introduction. First of all, by emphasizing the need to have a global debate, a transnational debate about what is going on. The second thing, the need to integrate discussions about what is happening in this part of the European Union, in Central and Eastern Europe. And as a Romanian scholar with strong connections in the EU community of communication scholars, I can promise you that this is one of my ambitions, to bring to the surface what is happening in Central and Eastern Europe, what is different, what is similar. So from this point of view, you can really count on my voice as it is in order to bring that kind of awareness. And the third point that I want to make before going into my presentation is a huge agreement, a violent agreement with what has been said, that one thing that the pandemic has exposed is that we are truly living a new communication revolution, and that this communication revolution truly impacts every one of us. Probably such a discussion as we are going to have today would have been impossible 2 years ago, because there would have been people coming saying, oh no, you are too scared. You are too pessimistic about social media. You are too pessimistic about the dangers and the threats to democracy or to public spaces. I think that including in this part of the world, we have to exploit this kind of opportunity and to bring awareness that we are experiencing global trends with local adaptations, which is what I'm going to present to you today. Hopefully, I will manage to open my presentations after 2 years. So I think I had not 1 million presentations, but let's say 1,000 video conferencing, and I still, at some point, I do not manage to do the right thing. So at some point, I hope that you see my presentation. Okay. If we manage to do this, half of my speech is already a huge success. Can you see the slides?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay. Shall I make them on the white screen?
Now
okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I really need some visual support, because we are not in a face-to-face encounter and I'm not such a charismatic speaker, so I really need this kind of support. The other reason is that my presentation will have a lot of visual information, and I'm sure that some of these visuals you'll recognize from your own national public spaces. So my presentation is about global narratives and local adaptations, the case of pandemic conspiracy narratives crossing the public spaces in Central and Eastern Europe. I will try to make a short, first of all, very short introduction, conceptual introduction, because we are in an academic encounter about the COVID-19 info disorder. We can talk about the name. Then I will provide some examples of the global examples of such global narratives. Then I will give you some examples from the Romanian public space, especially circulating on digital platforms. And third, I will make the point, why is this important? What are the policy implications? What are the implications for research and stuff like this? So again, some conceptual introduction. I think that the COVID pandemic has been closely accompanied by the info disorder, which is a combination between different communication phenomena such as misinformation, disinformation, rumors, propaganda, cognitive warfare, and this happening all at the same time during a global health emergency. My first point that I would like to make, and I think that this has a huge impact on our analytical approach of the problem, is that this kind of info disorder is taking place not under conditions of information scarcity, which was the cause of previous pandemics or the previous propaganda situations, for example, but it takes place under conditions of information overabundance. The second point that I want to make is that we are dealing with a global or a transnational problem, which is driven, which is enabled. Some say that it is created by the new information ecosystem. And the third point is that it may correlate with attempts by foreign actors, which can be state or non-state, to influence public conversation and people's trust and cognition. So COVID-19 information disorder, infodemics, disinformation, you call it as you like it, can cross paths with propaganda, with information warfare, with cognitive warfare. What I have chosen here to present some elements of cognitive warfare or information warfare, because I think that we can recognize them when analyzing and researching our own public spaces. First of all, under conditions of information overabundance and emotional overabundance, we are dealing with the weaponization of information and with weaponization of every major controversy in a society, what it is called hot buttons in a society. It presents close links to the new technological structure. This is why I think that my approach definitely fits the title of the conference, The New Communication Revolutions. For the past 2 years, in different encounters, which were research-driven or policy-driven, I have tried to create awareness around the fact that we are dealing with a new communication phenomena, with a completely changed communication environment. Hence, we have to come with new conceptual terms. Talking about emotions, the emotions that are highly weaponized during such an information disorder, and there is a huge body of research saying that these are the emotions that go viral, that have the greatest viralization potential: anger, mistrust, uncertainty, historical resentment, fear, insecurities, disillusionment, and historical traumas. Very briefly, what I mean by cognitive, no welfare, but it is warfare. Some elements of this cognitive warfare: the human mind is the battlefield. Differently from traditional propaganda, it goes straight to the people. Hence, a new term that I encountered in the literature, which is called ampliganda or reverse propaganda. It is based on bombardment, on the massive dissemination of multiple contradictory narratives to create information fatigue, in which people are overwhelmed with too much information and people are unable to determine what information is accurate. And I think that the next step is that people come to a situation of information fatigue when they no longer care about which information is accurate. So it fits closely with our general feeling of fatigue, this kind of information fatigue, when we no longer care about what is factual and what is not. Other elements of this cognitive warfare, the goal is not necessarily to convince someone of something, but to distort the public discourse and also to create the general feeling of disorientation. I have encountered, this is one of the, I have encountered the quote from this famous book in 2019, Team Human, that the impact of memetic warfare, that was the term in that situation. So as a result of memetic warfare or information warfare, we lose our ability to distinguish the real from the unreal, the actual from the imagined, or the threat from the conspiracy. And that contrary to popular accounts, the powers that work to disrupt democracies through information or memetic warfare invest in propaganda from all sides of the political spectrum. So their goal is not necessarily to convince, but to create this general feeling of disorientation and of fatigue. By cognitive warfare, I mean systemic manipulation of public conversation by distorting them, distracting attention, disrupting them, and also attacking a society's ability to operate with a shared epistemology. I think that in Poland, in Romania, and definitely in many countries from the European Union, probably in the United States too, we can see such phenomena such as two homogeneous blocks, us versus them, with a specific type of polarization which is both cognitive and emotional, and which take place irrespective of specific topics. So I think it is wildly different from the political polarization, which is policy-driven. So it is not a policy-driven kind of polarization, but it is emotional and cognitive, and you encounter it on all topics, irrespective of what these topics are. I will go now to presenting some of the most common narratives during the global pandemic. And again, these are widely documented. There are indexes of this kind of narratives. This is not necessarily my work in terms of documenting this kind of pandemic, but they have been widely signaled in the literature by research in policy reports and stuff like that. So the most common transnational or global narratives are, as you can see on the slides, the first, that the virus is a bioweapon, with the implicit idea that the whole pandemic is invented. The second narrative, which now is very, very strong, that the pandemic was invented in order to force for vaccination. Another pandemic, that there are fake remedies or miracle cures in order to treat COVID. Another one, which is widely spread, that the pandemic again was invented, that it was in fact a pandemic. I'm sure that all of us have encountered this kind of 5G conspiracy network and the idea that there is a global conspiracy to implant us with chips. And I think that the last two narratives are the most dangerous ones. I think in Romania, these are widely present, and I think this is my assumption, we need to back it by research, by transnational research. The two narratives, I think, are the most threatening for this part of the European Union. The widely observed comparisons between what is happening and what it is called, between commas, Nazism 2.0, the comparison between the pandemic measures with communism, with a genocide, with dictatorship, and the last one, anti-Western, anti-EU, raw exit, poll exit, and stuff like this. For the time being in Romania, this kind of narrative, which gained traction during pandemic about Romania exit, is a standalone, so it has not morphed into a meta-narrative yet, and I hope that it will not morph into a meta-narrative yet. I think that this kind of narratives, as you can see on the slides, are united by one overarching meta-narrative, which is the rejection of authority with a twisted version of liberty and individual rights. And I think that precisely this kind of meta-narrative is very powerful in Central and Eastern Europe, because it explains our historical sensitivities with dealing with communism, with dictatorship and stuff like that. So I think that that was specifically amplified in places such as Romania, Poland, and I think the whole Central and Eastern Europe. You'll have to excuse this kind of thing because, again, this kind of presentation is a mixture between documentation, observation, personal research, but I think it is our role to join forces in order to back this kind of research from many other places. I'll give you some.
Can
Yes.
I just interrupt you because
Yeah.
I can read? It's not only my screen. We can only see the first slide all the time, and probably you are changing the slide.
Yes.
But what we are seeing is just the first slide. Sorry for this technical issue. But I see it's not only my thing. Okay, right now it's changing. Okay, thank you.
So it is good because until now I didn't have visuals regarding this kind of. So this is where, thank you for, really thank you. I'm grateful for interrupting me. So my point is that these were the most common narratives worldwide: the bioweapon, the mandatory vaccination, the fake remedies, the pandemic thing, the anti-5G network and chips. And most importantly for this part of the world, these comparisons with dictatorship, with communism, with Nazism, and the anti-Western and anti-EU stand. It is good that you stop me because now I'll have some visuals and my presentation will be really irrelevant without this kind of visuals. There is also global conspiracy slang. And why this slang is important, because it is used for strategic signaling. It is turned into hashtags. It creates engagement on digital platforms. So I think that documenting this kind of common vocabulary is also a very important thing for research. So the people driving this kind of narratives rely on that kind of vocabulary. For example, people who get vaccination are sheeple, which is a combination between sheep and people. The people driving these narratives are truth tellers. They are the true guardians of freedom. You can find this widely spread term: hoax, pandemic, corruption of the global elite, censorship, tyranny, dictatorship, Nazism 2.0 or genocide, and this new entry in the Romanian space, at least, that Romania is a colony of the West and the colony of the European Union. I will provide you with some examples of local translations of this kind of global narratives in order for you to reflect on what is going on in your public spaces, and again, probably to join forces in order to bring them to the surface. So this corresponds to for example, to the narrative that it is a manufactured or a planned pandemic which was manufactured by the World Health Organization. You can see here that these are simple translations, so there is nothing local about this, only the translation. It is about the harsh critique of the World Health Organization, big pharma lobby, and again, it talks about the high-level corruption, and it is a movie. It is a short movie that was widely circulated in English and that was translated into Romania. Another instances of this narrative that the virus is a hoax, and that the tyranny of lies and dictatorships will be exposed. This widely used term about freedom, you can see that the visuals used in this kind of narrative are very, very powerful. This is another powerful narrative about the fake remedies and the miracle cures. I'm sure that you have encountered these suggestions on WhatsApp, on Facebook, on all social media, that you can ingest lukewarm water, that if you drink salt water and lemon, you will get cured from COVID. The most threatening part is that these kind of narratives are morphing, and they have changed to more threatening narratives, such as the doctor's kills, or hospitals are like slaughterhouses or like Auschwitz. So these kind of narratives, which started in a rather neutral way, that there are fake remedies or miracle cures to the COVID infection, have morphed into something more dangerous, with a rejection of medical authority. Salt water helps reduce the symptoms of COVID. And again, the examples that you have on the slide, in the left part of the screen, are simple translations from this kind of narratives that circulated in the English language, in French, in German, in Spanish, Italian, and they were translated into Romania. And one extra point, the fact that they circulated in English added to their credibility and made the people who were in charge with debunking them with a very difficult job, because the defense was, yes, but they are circulating all over. They come from the western part of the world. This is one of the strong narratives about the forced vaccination of population. And again, the example is taken from Romania. The latest frame about the forced vaccination is that the vaccines are the source of the recent number of deaths, that vaccinated people kill the unvaccinated people. And again, I'm inviting you to have a look at the strong visual component of such a narrative. Forced vaccination, the idea that since the vaccines are new, they are experimental, and that we are going through a huge experiment, that we are like slaves that are subject to a global experiment. And again, this is, you can see that these are taken from, these are simple local translations, these are not Romanian traductions, but they were simply translated. Here about the forced vaccination, the argument to the professional prestige. Again, I'm sure that in Spanish, these kind of statements from the former Nobel laureate Luc Montagnier were widely circulated. And again, it was very, very difficult to engage people in a conversation about this thing, because the first thing that they said is, hey, this is a Nobel laureate. How can you say that he is an anti-vaccination person? This is an example of the narrative coronavirus is a hoax, but we are talking about the pandemic. I'm sure that you know that the pandemic movie widely circulated on social networks. Now it has been taken down from Facebook, for example, but it still circulates on YouTube and with short versions on all platforms in Romania, at least. The 5G conspiracies, again, these are with strong visuals and with materials that circulated first in English, and they were translated to the Romanian space. About the COVID-19 and Nazi technologies, these are, I think, the latest, the new kids, the latest kids on the block. And I think that these are the most threatening ones. And here you can see this kind of, I do not know how to even to call it, I am speechless. And this kind of slogans were displayed of anti-vaccination protests in Bucharest. Right now, the digital networks are full of this kind of comparisons between the COVID-19 and the Nazi period. Very powerful frames such as a new Holocaust, a modern Auschwitz, Nazi 2.0. And again, you can see here the visual component with children, with images which resurrect very powerful historical memories. And the final narrative that I want to point is this kind of morphing of this kind of narratives into specifically anti-Western and anti-European frames. Probably you know that Romania and Poland are among the most enthusiastic EU countries. In general, it shows in the, I mean, up until 2 years ago, that kind of discussion about Romania exiting the European Union would have been a clear taboo. But my documentation and my research shows that all the previous frames that I have presented to you are morphing right now into this meta-narrative that it is time to Romania to reconsider its alliances, its geopolitical alliances. So slowly but surely, and that was probably this is one of my strongest points for today's presentation, is that the previous narratives are morphing into narratives that can be associated with geopolitical aims, anti-Western and anti-European Union stand. And you can see this kind of messages. The word slave and colony is widely present, associated with this kind of narratives. And I think that we can, if we change the colors of the flag and we study other spaces from Central and Eastern Europe, probably we can come up with exactly the same type of visuals. I would like to, I do not know how much time I have.
You still have some time, and it's good that you want to go to the global narratives, because there was a question in the chat. Please, can you repeat the most common narratives in global? So that's the time that you go for a global narratives saying this.
Me also. So the most common narratives worldwide: the bioweapon narrative, the forced vaccination, the fake narratives, the idea that the pandemic is a pandemic, the 5G and the chips, and this two dictatorship 2.0, communism, genocide, and the anti-Western, anti-European stance, which my intuition, my concept, my documentation up until to this moment is that these are probably widely amplified in this part of the world. So this is why I am more concerned about this, because again, my fear is that all these kind of narratives are starting to morph, at least in Romania, into this anti-EU stand, with by claiming openly that Romania should leave the European Union, which again was not the case 2 years ago. I mean, in Romania, to open such a discussion 2 years ago, it would have been completely out of the question, and you would have been completely banned, I mean, implicitly banned from the public space. I think why it is important to identify this kind of global narratives or transnational narratives for research or for policy actions or for actions in order to tackle disinformation. I think that it is important to be aware of this kind of global or transnational narratives, because at least during the pandemic, they provided the names of social networks, pages, groups, or hashtags. So I think that both for the researcher or for the policymaker or for the practitioners, I think it really helped, or it really could have helped to be aware of this kind of transnational narratives in order to identify early on this kind of groups, pages, hashtags. I think it is important to identify the voices, the vectors, the primary vectors that drive this kind of narratives, because if I jump directly to the final frame about anti-Western, anti-European Union, I think it really helps to identify who are the primary vectors, whether they are real persons, whether they are trolls, whether they are coordinated, whether they are funded from inside the country, from outside the country, and stuff like that. I think it is very important to study, to research the networks of amplification, both organic and artificial. It really helps for policy and for action as such to consult this kind of reservoir of transnational debunks in order to check various claims. And I think that in order to identify and to tackle this kind of global narrative, you have to do the permanent mapping of the information ecosystem, both mainstream, online, social, and social media. Maybe this is not very relevant to a research-driven conference, but I think it is still very important to mention them, because in the end, our research, I think, needs to fit into some concrete action. And I think that in order to prevent the circulation of this kind of narratives, it makes sense to identify patient zero, I mean the primary vectors and the primary amplification network. I think it is very important to identify inauthentic coordinated behavior by relying on big data analysis and network analysis. I think you have to immediately cooperate with platform representatives and to ask them to do down platforming, to slow down circulation, to flag content, to demote content. And I think it is very important to engage mainstream media, and both national and local, and credible public figures early on. I will try to go towards the end of my presentation, because this has theoretical implications too. I think the pandemic and what has happened all over the world, in the European Union, in our part of the European Union, feeds into the ongoing debate whether we are dealing with a new phenomena, whether we are dealing with old things or new technologies. As I have explained, this is my theoretical stand, but I'm trying to change it into policy input, is that we are dealing with a completely new phenomena, and that the platform technology is more of a driver than of a medium, that the platform technology is both an amplifier and an enabler, and we have to admit that confusion is engagement worthy, and it is newsworthy. So confusion, disorientation, anger are engagement worthy, and they generate engagement on social platforms. Again, I'm making reference to this term of ampliganda. I have encountered it very, very recently, and I think that it provides a very, very nice name to what is happening. The fact that it is a reverse propaganda, it is network propaganda, and in which we are both subject and object of attention. Some of the final points, I think that the stakes of identifying local translations of the global conspiracy slang of narratives have to do also with the present and with the future. They have theoretical implications, but they also have implications for policy and for action, because again, according to my documentation, to my research, these narratives are not new, are not necessarily new. They have been dormant in public spaces before the pandemic. Most of them are now recycled. So by logical inference, we can say that they are likely to survive the pandemic and to linger in the new information space and hit during the next crisis. I think that they are here to stay. Hence my emphasis on this kind of narratives that have geopolitical aims. I will conclude this kind of presentation with a big thank you. And this is me before experiencing the cognitive warfare firsthand. So if you see some wild differences between this picture and my current figure, you can blame it on the cognitive warfare that I have really experienced firsthand during that period of time. Thank you very much.